Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday and our second week, and I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about what you've already read and prepare you a little bit more for future readings. You have read, as of today, the reading Cities of Salt by Abdurrahman Munif, right? And also, at least the first two chapters of Guess of God by Robert Bianchi. Hopefully, you're further along in that book. And I just wanted to sort of say a couple of things. Of course, I'm really enjoying the discussion forum and a lot of your sort of insights and picking up on the answers to the questions and, of course, your own observations of the text. You will note, friends, of course, that Munif's writing, because it's a novel, symbolism is very important, right? A story, whether it's fictional or it's reality or it's sort of historical fiction, something like that, is an emulation of reality. It's a reflection of reality. So those of us in the classroom, or not in the classroom, but in the course that enjoy sort of reading novels and stories, will find this enjoyable. For people like me, I actually had to learn later on in life how to sort of read novels and enjoy that. It's more of a learned sort of a skill. But I think the story, again, the book is a bestseller. And a couple of observations. So there's some good comments, of course, here by Bradley and Jacqueline and others that relate Munif's writing to Ross chapter 5 when he's talking about oil-based violence. That's actually beautiful. That's a perfect connection. When Ross is really in the meat of his discussion talking about what is it that causes oil-based violence. How, in fact, having a strategic resource like oil is so tempting and is so troublesome and is so meddlesome in a country that if there are already sort of ethnic groups there, it causes a fracture there. Or if it's a society where tribal structures are important, like here we have the Bedouin, of course, oil tends to be a curse. So we're seeing a story where oil has been a curse and the type of society in which that takes place. You have, of course, the characters and their names. So what's the name of the guy who got killed all the way in the beginning of the story, right? His name is Mufaddi. In Arabic, this means like sacrifice. So it's not a coincidence, obviously. The name of the sort of troublesome guy, Johar, okay, again, meaning sort of essence or jewel or something like that. He, of course, is sort of native informant or the agent of the Americans and the government. Those are the bad guys, right? And then the sort of the tribe and the family, those are the good guys. So you have that at play. And of course, you have the symbolism of insulting someone and calling them a dog. So here in the US, where this course is taking place, predominantly, I would say, when we think of dogs, we think of maybe something like man's best friend or a pet, something sort of you nurture, or maybe like even like a pseudo child. In many traditional cultures, especially in the Middle East, a dog, again, it's very, very complicated, what a dog is in sort of, say, Middle East or in Islamic cultures. But certainly in this story, a dog is what, right? It's sort of, if you're someone's dog, you're like their lap dog, right? You're their servant. You're their henchman. It's like being a gang member. It's not a good association. As opposed to being, of course, there's a symbolism of the bird in the story. The bird is freedom. The bird is virtue. The bird is sort of righteousness, divinity. So you have those sort of in distinction to one another. There's some other symbolism in the story. I want to bring to your awareness, guys, also that the story is of Mufaddi, who is the sort of worker who got killed. The circumstances are mysterious and miraculous, okay? But then it leads to a strike, a worker strike, and then it turns into a larger strike. And people start calling for their rights, and it becomes a sort of a resistance to occupation, right? These should all be ringing bells in your mind. If and as you continue to study, Middle Eastern studies, history, it should sound familiar. Let me give you two brief examples from very, very recent history. You will have noted, or already know, that the so-called Arab Spring or Arab uprisings at the end of 2010 into 2011, which led in some cases to civil wars, as we have, and now even larger wars in Syria and in Yemen, in Libya, which is, again, also unresolved. But otherwise, popular demonstrations and revolutions in sort of especially Tunisia and Egypt. What was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back in Tunisia and Egypt? It was a young man who was either brutally murdered or had a sort of a violent death. In the case in Tunisia, it's Mohammed Bouazizi, who set himself on fire. Again, you can Google this for more information. I want to keep the video short. And in the case of Egypt, it was Khalid Said, who was beaten to death by the police in 2010 and 2011. So because of those cases, that was the sort of the light that ignited the whole revolution. That story is told here, decades in advance, right? This is a pattern that we see in these countries, where police brutality and violent death, and when state structures tend to sort of go too far, and it's symbolized in one death or one tragedy, and then things sort of spiral out of control from there. Very, very powerful. So keep that in mind as well. And you think about, I mentioned, of course, who are the martyrs, who are the mufaddis of 1973, the 1980s, and all the different sort of revolutions and wars that occurred in the region. 1979, of course. So the story is full of symbolism. If you have any sort of other questions, you can, of course, email me. To transition a little bit, I don't know if I can do this in this video. Yeah, let's do it. To Bianchi, chapters 1 and 2. So this book, Guests of God, this is a classic. You really should read the whole thing. So this book is about the Hajj. The Hajj is an integral ritual for traditional Muslims around the world, Sunni and Shia. And there are, of course, Bianchi provides you with sort of introduction. When he himself is a convert, he went to Hajj in Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia. He tells you about the rituals itself and sort of draping himself in the white robes and going around the Kaaba, the cube that is, of course, said to be the original home of Abraham and where Muhammad was born, etc., the city where he was born. So there's a lot of that going on. But more importantly, he provides the names of three sort of modernists or modernist interpretations of what is the Hajj. What is this very important ritual in Islam, in all traditional Islam? He provides these names, of course. Some of y'all mentioned it in your discussion sort of questions and answers. You have Muhammad Iqbal, Ali Shariati, and Muhammad Arkoun. So Iqbal, Shariati, and Arkoun, I think these are great names, and I'm glad he did this. It's very good coverage of the sort of Muslim majority world, Muslim majority countries. Iqbal really does sort of represent a certain school of thought in South Asia, India, Pakistan area. And Shariati, and of course in Iran and the Shia sort of a believing world, and Arkoun in Arab North Africa. It's very good coverage. Read them, get to know more about them. And if you even like them, some of you have taken the course with me, or if you're interested, I have a course on Islam and modernity where we talk about these guys and many others, and also female scholars. And we get deep into what is Islamic modernism. But you'll also find schools of Islamic thought that don't even believe in the Hajj, who kind of believe that Hajj is a kind of idolatry. So there's a lot of discussion of what Hajj is and how important it is. But what this book looks at is it looks at Hajj as an industry, right? So what does it mean when you have a global pilgrimage industry? Hajj is unique in that it attracts between 1 to 2 million followers from around the world to go to Mecca for like a week or so and do these sort of very, very onerous tasks in the heat and walking and climbing and throwing stones and sort of spending nights praying, etc. So it's a very sort of you go there because you really have a deep, deep connection, spiritual connection, and a sort of love for religion. So what we do, of course, is we look at the business side of things. There's some good comments over here, right? I know that Marlena and Lamis, Amani, you guys have made some great comments. Amani, of course, talks about how the Hajj actually works, according to Bianchi, which is that people make it work. That is a fascinating story, guys, right? So you have a multi-billion-dollar sort of industry in Saudi Arabia, which functions year-long, has to do with, think about everything, from the oil and gas to the tourist offices to the airlines to the security to the infrastructure, hotels, everything, the whole 9 yards. But yet, as you all have noted, there are a lot of dangers when 1 million people or 1.5 million people are kind of crammed into these different camps around the city. There's stampedes, there's fire, etc., etc. And yet, people are the ones that make it work. It's these strangers who come from around the world, and because they have a spiritual connection. And if you think about it, what do Catholics share in common? What do sort of Jews or Hindus or what do they share in common? People, strangers from around the world, will meet, and because they have that connection, they can not only get along for a week, but they can build this sort of lifelong bond, and they can keep each other alive. They can survive during this very difficult week. Anyway, to back up a little bit and look again at the OIC, the Office of Islamic Cooperation, and what is this office? Of course, it was started in Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis are in control of this organization that manages the Islamic pilgrimage. One country controls Islamic pilgrimage for the whole world. So a country with 30 or so million population controls pilgrimage for a population that's almost 2 billion. You should think about that for a minute. And that's because of petrodollars. It's about oil wealth. Anyway, so as we get deeper into this book, think about how countries today, powerful countries, can fund religion. How is it that we fund Islam? How is it that we fund the Hajj, right? It's a little bit of an unfair question if you ask me, but that's what we're talking about right now, because Islam is always front and center. Islam gets a lot of media attention, a lot of media coverage. So it's best for us to understand by reading books rather than, of course, just looking at media sources. The video should help as well. Anyway, so as you continue to deepen your knowledge of the global sort of Hajj industry, the OIC, sort of different ethnic populations coming together, and of course the problem of Sunni versus Shia, what are the Sunni, what are the Shia as well, and how that manifests itself within the Hajj. And of course the sort of different Islamic interpretations of Hajj. Think about those, and as you read even more deeply into the text, you'll notice that the Dutch, of all things, play a sort of surprising role. So keep your sort of mind open for when the Dutch pop up in this. Not Dutch disease, that was also with Ross, right? So the Dutch are somehow, they're special in everything that we read. Okay, so looking forward to more comments, and I will probably leave another video later this week. Okay, bye.